Greetings, fanboys and fangirls. Jared here with another review from Fanboys Forever. Today it's my pleasure to bring you a review of the brand new Atticus Necroverse edition. Now, this is the second release of Atticus, as Mezco is wont to do with most of its original Rumble Society characters. In the past, we've seen Mezco do some incredibly gnarly second releases of characters, and as you can see, this guy too really makes a big impact right off the bat. Now, by far, this is one of the more complex figures that you'll come across from Mezco's offerings, and that's saying something considering their usual level of sophistication. So strap in as we take a very close look at this brand new figure. But before I begin, let me just go ahead and thank everyone for watching and humbly ask that you consider subscribing and liking the video if you haven't already done these things. It really does help us out, and I was very heartened to see the outpouring of support in the comments from my last Mezco review. I didn't think people really watched these too much, but I was really glad to see the amount of support in the comments, and I really thank you. It didn't go unnoticed. Alright, let's jump right in. First of all, we should acknowledge the cool packaging. I really enjoy Mezco's play on the original box art, and they pretty much just added a few little details that make this guy unique and change the color scheme out, so it looks really cool. On the side, we have some art of him in his Cthulhu form. On the back, he's full-on Cthulhu form, and on the side, his skeletal form. Beyond that, you should know that this figure was sold exclusively on the Mezco Toys website, and the price was right around $100. Right off the bat, when I opened this guy up, I did have a little issue that we'll get into very quick. It's not going to affect the review of the figure very much at all, but it is something that everyone should be aware of. Unfortunately, the button up here instantly cracked and broke, so much so that it pretty well just separated from the fabric. Usually I'm very careful with these buttons, and this was no exception because I know just how fragile these little button pieces are, but I found out I was not the only one, as a lot of the groups have been flooded with complaints about some of the buttons, whether it be the top, the middle, or the bottom one, just separating and breaking the first time that they're used. So for that reason, now I can only button the two bottom ones, and they seem okay, but this experience did leave me wondering about the viability of the other two. Thankfully, I did contact Mezco and ask if I could get a replacement coat, and they said that there will be a slight delay, but I will get that here in a few weeks. So what's the point of waiting, right? Let's go ahead and review. Besides, I never really planned on buttoning the top button that much anyway, because I want you to be able to see the tie when I have the coat fastened. But with that little bit out of the way, let's begin and look at the figure in earnest. First of all, I'll remove the hat here because this is just one of many options that you get with this figure. There's several different heads and hats and just all sorts of things. So it's very important that we clarify that right off the bat. This figure is pretty well a re-release of the original Atticus, and he's kind of an occult detective type of character, and that seems to be Mezco's favorite genre of characters. Combine that with the idea that he has a skull for a head, and you have a figure that's shot straight to the top of Mez's to-do list. This turban, and without the eye flames, which are accessories, is how the figure comes packaged with the coat completely buttoned up. So the default look for the character is pretty much this, and which is a cool look, but there's so much cool stuff going on with his vest and his tie that I cannot have that covered up in good conscience. The head sculpt is exactly the same as before, the only difference being that now he's in this nifty kind of palish green that is glow in the dark. His vest also has a beautiful new pattern, and the tie is just quite different altogether besides just being a different color. And I really like the added detail of the pattern on the vest. I really like it when Mezco goes out of their way to do these micro details because they do a great job of selling the figure as something that is wearing real clothing. Even though you can't see a whole lot of it, you can see that he is wearing a belt that's slightly obscured by the ends of the vest. Here he's just wearing regular slacks or trousers down here that are black, and he has some nondescript shoes with some pretty nondescript bottoms. The coat is a very impressive piece, especially for the scale, considering that you have this neat green fur on it. You have it right around the cuffs right here, and of course most prominently around the collar. As we turn the figure around, you can see it continues, but there is no lining of it at the bottom, and there's nothing on the inside aside from black, which probably just would have been distracting anyway. I believe that this figure is meant to represent Atticus as if he went into the Necroverse, which is kind of like this netherworld, and so that's why that they're sure to have all of these glow-in-the-dark features, and also to have him in these more wild colors. There's quite a lot of detail, even in something as simple as the turban that he wears. Taken as a whole, the overall look for this figure is mightily impressive. He is quite a bit more visually striking than that original release, and I think it's led a lot of people to actually prefer this one, as sometimes happens when Mezco gets those second releases and recolors really, really right, and I think they definitely did here. Of course, the coat is easily removable. You'll just want to remove both hands. Now, unlike a lot of Mezco releases that are wearing big coats, this one actually has quite a bit of worthwhile detail for you to look at if you remove the coat. Whereas a figure like, say, John Constantine, there's not much to write home about aside from, say, a dress shirt. Here, it's a lot more ornate and just a lot more visually interesting. As you can see, not only do you get a better look at the vest and the tie, but you can also now go to the back where it's done with this kind of almost silk screened looking fabric. Now mine has kind of a funny wrinkle or something through the top. Not really sure what makes this, but it's there. Maybe yours is the same, maybe it isn't, let me know in the comments. But it's just really shiny, and it kind of adds to that ethereal sort of look, like he's floating through this nether realm. And I think it's a terrific look, actually. Speaking of things that are removable from the outfit, you can, of course, remove all of the hats and turbans. And just like the original release, on the inside, he has his brain with a little eyeball on the inside. This is referred to as the oculus, and it is indeed removable. The entire brain can be lifted right out of the head, which is kind of cool. And then you're left with this brain piece where you can see the oculus right below it. If you push, that just dislodges from the top, and you can replace it with other options from, say, the Atticus accessory pack that they did called the Magical Enhancement Kit. So there's a lot of options there, and then you just push it back in when you're ready to use it again. And with that, the oculus is lodged back into the brain. And it easily goes back in, and is thankfully a very secure fit. Not only that, but in this form, this is the only way to see the really cool decision that Mezco made with the forearms. So here you can actually see that the forearms are this kind of transparent, almost like energy form of Atticus. And it looks really cool, completely transparent, as you can sort of see my finger clouding it back there. And you can sort of see the mechanism, but it's not too distracting that's doing the articulation. And I think this is great because you can easily roll up the sleeves to get this really neat look. I think the one unfortunate thing is it probably overexposes the ball joints on the wrist a little bit, and kind of looks a little funny, at those wrist joins. But I think other than that, you have a very legitimate look for the character once you have the sleeves rolled up. As a matter of fact, I actually hadn't noticed before, but when you pop the head off, you can actually see that the neck is that same transparent green. Something they really didn't have to do, but they did, and I really appreciate. Also worth noting that the tie is completely removable, and he looks like he's wearing Luke Skywalker's tunic from Return of the Jedi. So that too is actually a completely legitimate look for you to go with. I don't think this vest would be easily removable, but I'm sure some enterprising customizer could do such a thing if they so desired. Unlike other releases they've done, like I said, I think that this is a pretty legitimate way to display the character, especially if you want to get him into more interesting poses. You know me, I never focus too much on articulation on these reviews because most of us know what to expect, but for every one of us, there's several people that have never owned this figure and want to know exactly how it can move and what the limits are. So the head can go up and down very easily, you get all kinds of range there. Go left and right all the way, of course. At the shoulders, you get even more than 90 degrees. This is using the slightly smaller, more wiry, super articulated body that Mezco developed several years ago that they've used. We have double jointed elbows. We do have a rotation at the bicep. We have hinges at the wrists, and they can be rotated. The arms can go all the way up, especially if you have the coat off. Of course, there is a hinge in the diaphragm here, and you can rotate it side to side and backwards and forwards. I wouldn't go too crazy if I were you, because you, of course, don't want to bust the joins off of the vest, but you can get plenty. There's also a slight rotation there, but again, I wouldn't go too nuts. Right here at the legs, you can see that he is a very athletic paranormal gymnast, because you can see that he's easily able to get those splits, and that's about how far you would want to go with the slacks. You can also see that he can get really high kicks, so that's no problem at all. The legs are black, it appears, so under there, he's symbiote Spider-Man. And then you have a rotation at the hip. You have double jointed knees. His leg can go back about that much, stopped by his Atticus butt. And at the ankles, these can be rotated. It has a hinge with lots of range and an ankle pivot. I really do wish that all of the Mezco ankles had this kind of range. Unfortunately, every now and then we get a figure like Theodore Sodcutter, who is great in practically every other respect, but there's some weird articulation hang-ups with him. But with Atticus here, he uses all of that revised articulation that Mezco should be incorporating into every release, but sometimes they don't. For as much as I like the figure visually like this, I do prefer him with the coat, so we'll go ahead and switch back. The one problem that I seem to be having with switching the jacket in and out is that the sleeves underneath roll back up the arms. It's not a major issue, but I'm not really sure how to fix it. Now with this bare forearm down here, you have this fabric bunched up here, and it's probably hurting him a little, not much, but you can definitely tell that there's a little bit of pressure in there. Thankfully, he isn't all that inhibited on the arms by the coat. As you can see, I didn't have to do too much, and he's able to get his arms straight up. Just be aware of the shirt under it. Like I said, even though mine doesn't button up all the way anymore, here is a look at what it looks like with the bottom two buttoned up, which is the best I can do. And even if this isn't how I'm going to keep him most of the time, it's a great look to be able to do. I'm going to switch him to the hat that he had at the beginning, which is one of my favorites for this particular release. This is the fedora that he comes with, and I've seen a lot of sculpted fedoras in my day, courtesy of Indiana Jones figures and many others, but I really like how this one looks. There's just something about it. I feel like they got the shape right, they got the size right, it doesn't look oversized, so I think that this is a great look. He kind of seems like a shadowy kind of investigator this way, like Casablanca gone bad, or something like that. I think even with the coat open, he kind of has a gangster look to him, and I really think that's cool. Of course, the bulk of this review will be taken up by me showing you accessories, so let's go ahead and get a start on that. Not to be outdone by Ted Sodcutter, he does include a top hat as well. So I guess this is him as a, man about town? I use the term man loosely, but this is really cool looking. I particularly like your ability to utilize his cane in this mode. And here we have Atticus Doom, Right Proper Learned Gentleman edition. And with the cane, you give him the book that he comes with. He does look like a man of true sophistication. Speaking of the book, we should go ahead and have a look at this. Anybody who's familiar with the book from the first release remembers just how impressed that I was when I opened this thing and found that it had actual paper pages bound into it with graphics and drawings, like a spell book that he's using. I can't get over how this is even possible in the 1/12 scale. Very amazing. I am sincerely still just as impressed as I was, and the clasp works perfectly. It's not too tight, and it's certainly not too loose, so that you can keep that book closed if you wish. Of course, the cane is awfully impressive as well, having almost like a shriveled up skull and symbols etched into it, and of course, this too is done in that glow-in-the-dark green plastic. The one thing is his hand almost doesn't want to hold it up here, kind of limiting your options because it's so thick, but held more towards the bottom is probably a more comfortable fit for this particular hand. Good day, sir. Speaking of being a British gentleman from the 1800s, he hilariously comes with a monocle, but not just any monocle. It's this little guy. It is an eyeball. I suppose he uses this to peer into other dimensions. All you have to do is press it in. It is not meant to go into the other eye because the chain is going this way, so that would look kind of funny. And sure enough, this is awesome and hilarious in just about all the right ways. I don't know how they stumbled upon this idea, but it really is a great one. Now, this isn't the first time we've seen the monocle feature. It was, of course, in the weapons pack that was called the Magical Enhancement Kit. I kind of wonder if he doesn't take the oculus out of his brain and then put it right here into his eye, if that's the intention with the character. Of course, earlier you already saw where I had popped in these two flame effects into the eye sockets, and that's of course to just make it look like energy is coming out of the head. But since there's so many accessories, we better get a move on. Much like Constantine, if you wish, there are little energy effects to put around the wrists. Simply unplug the hand from the peg and put on your effect, and ta-da! You can see that it's just like he's reaching through some kind of energy. It also comes with a smaller one if that's what you wish, and they're both in a transparent green color. And unfortunately, I am just as surprised as you may be to hear that I think I'll just have to stop the review there. As you can see, poor old Atticus, his wrist joint has snapped, which is actually something that has never happened to me before with Mezco. It's happened to a lot of people, and I've been collecting these for a lot of years, so I count myself lucky that it hadn't really occurred yet so far. But here I am, and it's going to make it really difficult to show off a lot of the alternate hands and things. So I definitely gave it my best shot at reviewing this guy. And at this point, it's going to take so long for Mezco, who usually does come through pretty well when it comes to replacements and things. It's going to take so long for me to get that kind of thing that by that point, there won't be as much point in reviewing him. So I just hate it because I was looking forward to showing a bunch of cool stuff with the figure. Just to summarize, here's some of the cool things. Like, he had this awesome head, the Cthulhu kind of head. Of course, if I just had an extra wrist peg right here that I could utilize, I'd be in business. I could probably dig this one out, heat it up, and put in an extra peg and go about my way. But unfortunately, I don't really have an extra, and that's something that Mezco should probably look into starting to include with these guys, is just having an extra one ready to roll, because it seems like such an issue moving forward. They also may want to consider giving separate individual wrist pegs to each hand that actually comes out of the wrist and plugs in. I don't know if that would be better or worse. It wasn't mishandled. You've seen me do a lot of these reviews. You know that I take a lot of care in making sure that things don't get broken, but you know, it's just one of those things. So overall, disappointing kind of conclusion to this review. I was looking forward to also showing you the claw here and doing a lot of comparisons and showing off glow-in-the-dark stuff, but you know, you can of course understand how it's kind of is a very demotivating kind of thing when you're trying to talk about how much you like a figure and then it just sort of falls apart, literally. With this and the button breaking, there just really isn't a good way, I don't think, to continue forward and to even suggest the figure, because if this is indicative of the kind of quality that was on this particular release, then it's poorer quality than I expect from Mezco, and certainly poorer quality than I've had for a while with Mezco. So it's unfortunate, but I thank you for the ones that did watch, and trust me, I'm disappointed. Hopefully Mezco can make me whole on this one, and you know, I can move forward with it, or I can just switch it out myself somehow. I don't know. The truth is, you shouldn't have to do any of that stuff when you are paying a very premium price for a figure. And yeah, I can't necessarily recommend a Necroverse edition Atticus Doom because I think that my experiences are kind of speaking for themselves here. There's just not a lot left to say. If this hadn't been a thing, it would have been great to have kind of shown off some of the really cool accessories like the bendy tentacle that's glow in the dark and things like that, but all of that relies on that peg being there to hook it in, and it's a great figure in theory. It's just not a great figure in production. So that's my honest 2 cents. You know, here at Fanboys Forever, we're not going to hide if a figure isn't what it should be. We're just going to talk about that, and that'll be a part of the review. That'll be a part of the opinion. But thank you again for watching. Of course, be sure to subscribe, and I promise that I'll try to make sure that other reviews aren't as abrupt and weird as this one. And as always, God bless you and yours. And I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Fanboy out.